Hello, and welcome to this brief presentation on Chapter 12, Information Systems Development. Although organizations increasingly buy their applications, sometimes they have to develop their own information systems. For example, because they can't find an application that will meet their specific requirements. In this module, we discuss the processes used in the development of an information system. On completion of this module, you will be able to define the term Business Process Management or BPM, describe the importance of BPM for organizational success, describe the stages of BPM, and discuss the issues involved in information systems development and describe some tools and techniques to address those issues, including different information systems development methodologies. Recall that we defined the business process as a network of activities that transforms inputs into outputs. We also discussed how business processes are central to what an organization does. It's therefore not surprising that we've seen the emergence of a discipline within information systems called Business Process Management. Business Process Management, BPM, is simply the explicit management of business processes. There are a number of reasons that organizations engage in business process management. First, by explicitly managing business processes, you will see opportunities to improve the quality of the business processes, and you can act on those opportunities. Second, changes in technology can sometimes prompt the organization to change its business processes. For example, the emergence of the internet and smartphones has forced organizations to adapt their customer service operations. It's no longer sufficient to only use the telephone hotline for customer support. If an organization uses BPM, it's less difficult to deal with these changes. Finally, changes in business fundamentals may require a change in business processes. For example, the emergence of Amazon as an online bookseller forced many other booksellers, including Barnes & Noble, to develop an online sales channel as well. Again, if an organization uses BPM, it's less difficult to respond to these changes. BPM itself is a continuous cycle of 4 activities. The first is modeling. Using a widely used notation such as BPMN, Business Process Management Notation, organizations will document both the current process and the processes as they should be. Clearly, this allows you to identify gaps between the current process and the process it should be, and you can then create components to address those gaps. Sometimes this will require re-engineering business processes. At other times it will require the acquisition or development of a new software application. Most often it will involve both. And once the components have been created, you implement them. And once the new business process has been implemented, you assess it to determine what it allows the organization to better meet its strategies. And this often leads to a new cycle of model, create, implement, assess. As an aside, in Module 4 we distinguish between structured and dynamic processes. BPM works well for structured processes, but it works less well for dynamic processes, which after all are less structured and more flexible and are therefore harder to model. Many organizations therefore also adopt a set of techniques called case management to deal with dynamic processes. If you're interested, we offer courses later in the program devoted to business process management. As said, sometimes organizations have to engage in IS development, i.e. they have to build an application from scratch. Information systems development projects involve a number of activities. The first activity is a definition of the system. This includes identifying the goals and scope, i.e. what the system should do and equally important what it should not do. During this activity you also conduct a feasibility study to determine how realistic it is to develop the system in the first place. Once the system has been defined, we determine the requirements, i.e. the functionalities that the system should have or allow for it to be able to meet the goals that were defined for the system. Note, that while we are discussing these activities in the context of information systems development, they're also relevant when an organization decides to buy a new application. If the organization decides to develop a new system, the next activity is to design the components and build the system. The organization then implements the system. Since the new information system often replaces an existing information system, the organization needs to decide how it will transition to the new system. For example, in a large organization with multiple sites, it can pilot the new system in one site within the organization. Or it can implement the new system in phases. This option is open if the new system consists of distinct components that can be adopted independently. It can also decide to run the old and new system in parallel for a while. Clearly, this entails a lot more work, but makes it easier to determine whether the new system meets the need of the organization and allows the organization to simply revert to the old system if it does not. Finally, the organization can plunge into using the new system by simply switching off the old system and starting to use the new system, typically overnight. The last activity in IS development is maintenance. Maintenance involves not only fixing issues with the system called bugs, but also adding functionalities as the need for these additional functionalities becomes clear. Although all information system projects involve the same set of activities, they're not always done in the same order. This then leads to the concept of SLDCs, or System Development Lifecycle Models. SLDCs are used to manage the processes involved in IS development. There are many different SLDCs, but they can be distinguished along two dimensions. First, as we move from one activity to the next, should the results of the first activity, often called deliverables, be frozen, or can they be changed as the information systems is further developed? Second, can the system be delivered in chunks, or does it have to be delivered at once? The oldest SLDC, the waterfall model, insists that all deliverables are frozen and can never be reopened, or at least only with great difficulty, and that the entire system is delivered at once. More modern SDLCs, often called agile methods, do not insist that deliverables be frozen and allow for the system to be delivered in components. The Scrum, a methodology that is discussed in great detail in the textbook, was designed specifically to support agile methods. Finally, it's a well-known fact that information systems development is difficult. As an aside, the Standish Group publishes its so-called Chaos Report every year, in which it looks at the fate of a large number of IS implementation projects and determines what reasons are most likely to be behind the failure of IS implementation projects. Although the situation has improved since the Standish Group published its first Chaos Report in 1995, in 2015 only 29% of IS projects were completely successful, with 52% being challenged, i.e. being late or over budget or not delivering on all the requirements, and a fully 19% were failures. Clearly, this is not a track record to be proud of. There are a number of reasons for the difficulties in implementing information systems. For example, it's often difficult to determine the exact requirements, and again there are some reasons behind this, such as the fact that system developers often speak a different language from business users. Also, given the dynamic business environment, requirements often change during the development process. And finally, scheduling and budgeting is difficult, and IS projects often start based on what turn out to be wrong assumptions about schedule and budget. And this concludes our brief presentation. Please read the relevant chapter in the textbook, and if you have any questions, please contact me. Thank you.